Welcome to Voice by Vinexposium, where the global wine and spirit community shares insights, stories, and expertise. Voice is your platform, your stories, and your voice.
Hello, I'm Anne Burchett, wine marketing and communication specialist, and this is Voice by Vinexposium. Voice by Vinexposium deals with the topics that matter in the wine and spirits world. Today, I am talking to Laurent President of the Board of Directors of Champagne Paul Roger, Frederico Falcão, President of Wines of Portugal, and Natalie Wong from Hong Kong, founder and editor of Vinojoy News. Good morning, and thank you for joining me.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Exports used to get easier every year. This stopped in 2016 with the election of President Trump and subsequent tariffs on single malts and French wines. Brexit and the tariff imposed by China on Australian wines in 2020 eventually lifted in March 2024. As we speak, the prospect of American tariffs is looming again. Yet, we've never needed exports more. Laurent, in Champagne, for example, exports make up the majority of sales at 56.4%, yet they dropped by 10.8% in 2024. How is Champagne in general, and Paul Roger in particular, managing current challenges?
I think it's, in our life, we always had challenges. And in the last 30, 40, 50 years, we always had cycles, and we just have to go back to the markets to meet our customers and to realize that the trees are not climbing to the sky. We are back to reality, and it's a good chance for us to explore maybe new markets, because there are a lot of new markets we have not been exploring yet. And it's time for thinking about positioning, pricing, customer satisfaction.
Okay, so a very general commercial rejigging of the different elements that make the mix.
Yes, so the growth of Champagne in the last decades has been enormous. I mean, we went from just over 30 million after the Second War to over 300 million, 330 million. The record being in 2007. Champagne lost 50 million bottles in the last 2 years. I mean, it is a big drop, but maybe it's time to take a new breath.
Okay, so would you care to add a word about French wines in general, because you are a member of the board of the Fédération des exportateurs de vins et spiritueux de France?
I think for the first time in many years, all the sector is facing challenges. Spirits, wine, still wine, sparkling wines. And we all have to join forces to make sure that we are meeting the expectation of the market. I mean, there are other challenges, because many customers now there are new trends, there are new expectations, there are people looking for wines with maybe less alcohol. So there are many challenges, but I am quite optimistic. I mean, I always like the half full glass rather than the half empty glass.
Are you saying that marketing may be the solution?
I am not. I don't know what is marketing. You know, in Champagne, I like the say of my predecessor at Paul Roger, Christian Paul Roger, who has been the face of the house for 42 years. And he was saying, my business is fizziness.
That's lovely. Frederico, Portugal is the fifth most valuable wine producer globally, with an average price of €2.82 per litre. And Portuguese wine are often described in the UK as the next big thing. Portugal is currently grappling with an overstock of wine. What are the biggest commercial challenges and possibly opportunity for Portuguese wine on export markets?
Okay, so yes, we do have an oversupply of wine, but we are not producing enough wine for our needs. So that's strange, huh?
I was about to say, that's quite
that's-
interesting.
But the thing is, in average, in Portugal, we
Yeah.
consume 5.5 million hectoliters.
Okay.
We consume 5.5, and we export 3. So that makes 8.5. But we produce 7. So the thing is, we are importing too much wine from a country, I don't remember the name, but we are importing a lot of wine.
Would that be a neighboring country?
Yeah, would be very close. But we are importing a lot of wine because, you know, the market is tough for everyone now.
Yeah.
So the consumers, they want low-priced wines, so it's easier to import inexpensive wines, cheap wines, whatever, and to put in bag-in-box to sell it to the entry-level wine. So they are growing a lot. That's why we are importing a lot of wine, and that is making us creating a problem now in Portugal. So it's quite easy to overcome this problem if we stop importing so much wine. So it's quite simple to solve the problem. But our aim, of course, is to promote Portugal as a brand, as Wines of Portugal, a big brand, and to open new doors for the Portuguese wines. So that's why we come to fairs like Wine Paris, and we go all around the world to communicate, to promote our Portuguese wines.
Okay, so commercial opportunities.
Commercial opportunities,
mostly.
open new doors.
Okay, Nathalie. I'm old enough to remember the excitement of French producers when China started importing wine. At the time, the calculation was quite crude. If every Chinese person drinks a bottle of wine a day, that's 1 billion
That will be a lot.
that will be solved, and all our problems will be solved. Can you give us, and I know this is a tall order, can you give us a quick overview of the Chinese market, where it's at in the moment, and what about these fantasies?
Oh, well, Anne, I wish that was the case. And if I had a magic wand, I'll make it happen. But
Please do.
If actually Chinese start to drink a bottle of wine a day, or even just a year, we don't have enough wine in the world to, feed the country. But unfortunately, reality is so different. After the booming days of the wine market that we've seen in 2017, 2018, the market crashed after 2018. What had happened, we had wine imports dropping by half, actually compared, if we're looking at the wine imports data, even in last year, that was half of the value in 2020, right at the start of the pandemic. So the market contracted huge amount of wine consumption in just last 4 years, and China dropped from, I think before the pandemic was the 5th biggest wine consumer to right now it's 9th.
Yep.
So it's a huge decline for the Chinese market. And of course, one big thing happened in the past few years is the Australian wine exit. And not only it greatly impacted Australian wine industry, and also for the domestic Chinese market. You saw the exit of a lot of the wine importers going bankrupt or just, folding their businesses because of Australian exit, and also the economic downturn, and also, most importantly, the property market collapse. I always try to tell people that has a huge impact on the downturn of wine consumption, because you have to remember 70% of family assets in China are tied to property. When they have a little bit idle money, they invest in property. And when that is frozen up, and people naturally, they're cutting back on non-essential spendings, and wine naturally not being part of essential goods, took a huge hit. And that's why we are at where we are now. But luckily, and there are some good news. Australian wines are now back, and China's wine imports data, based on the customs data we can access, actually rebounded by 40%, close to 40% from last year. Right now, we're looking at $1.6 billion US, which we are not back to the glory days of 2018 yet, but we are slowly getting there.
And has a balance shifted between, I mean, obviously Australian wine took a hit and it takes a while to rebuild. So what's taken their place?
Oh, a very interesting question, because at the time when China imposed the tariffs, and I was talking to wines of Chile and other countries, everybody was sort of like,
Let us in.
Yeah, let us in. We'll take the void, we'll take the
Yeah.
market share, because Australian wine back then took up 40% of the market. But unfortunately, none of that happened. We don't see Chilean wines, Italian wines, even French wines making inroads to fill that void. So it was very unfortunate. We never had men players sort of surging up, taking the place of Australia. In fact, what happened on the contrary is we see this contraction of French wines, Chilean wines, all the other sort of countries really dialed back. And we see this kind of downturn happening across the board.
So do you think the tariff, we always blame the tariff for the downturn. You're adding to that the economic situation, but maybe was it more economic situation that downturn?
Yeah, so for Australian
tariff,
wine,
sorry?
yeah, so for Australian wines drop, definitely that's because of the tariff. So when
Yeah.
China imposed a tariff, that's up to 200%. That's a huge, high, sort of like hefty tariff. But for other countries, definitely it's more economic problem because China economy is not growing as fast as it used to be, and again the property market crash really took a dent on people's purse strings. Everybody is tightening up their spending, and where do I spend? You're looking at to spend money on food, and especially at the time unemployment rate is high, so people are really cautious on where they are parking their money. So wine, unfortunately, and in the past, wine was mainly used for gifting and business banquets. We don't actually know the data, like how much of wine is actually drunk. And if I have to guess, a lot of the, French wines, particularly Bordeaux, classified Bordeaux, sold in China, were exchanged between people, and that probably there was a high percentage that was probably never drunk. So that naturally took a huge hit as well.
So was there an element of regifting where people get a present and then they put it aside and give it to someone else?
That I don't know, but probably they just put it aside and regift, as you said, but that was never really consumed. So that's the reason we never built up a consumer-based market. There was a lot of speculative buying. People have money and they'll think, oh, I'll buy some Bordeaux. A few years later, I'll make some investment out of this. And that really never happened, with Premier sort of like not being very favorable at the moment. It was a combination of that. And then in the past, when the business was booming, and then you can go to, entertain your clients, and you are buying expensive wines for growth and for your business partners, for officials, that was gone completely. And then what has been really happening in the past few years is, people are trading down, buying less expensive wines. Instead of buying wines for gifting or buying wines based on what people tell them should buy, they're actually buying wines that they like to drink for everyday consumption. That's why we have the boom of German Riesling right now, actually Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, Cloudy Bay is very popular, and also Moscato Dusty. Those entry-level wines actually are selling quite well in the markets. So that's encouraging. You do have consumers now, new consumers entering the category, starting with sort of entry-level, easy-drinking wine. And the hope is that they will graduate and essentially start to drink Bollinger, right?
Can I ask a question?
Go on.
Because
I'm the one asking the question, but you're allowed, just one.
Just one. Because I like to study the markets and the stats and whatever. And I've seen also that the production of wine in China has dropped a lot.
Yeah.
So why are you grabbing up vineyards or?
Yeah, production has dropped a lot, especially led by those big state-owned companies. Because in the past, it was really concentrated on the big players like Great Wall and Changyu. And naturally, that they're pumping out too much wine. The market can't consume those wines. That's why the production has really dropped. But interestingly, in the past few years, the growth of domestic wines is another trend that we watch actually very closely. So, for instance, producers in Ningxia and producers in Yunnan sort of like Burgundy, high altitude, very small. Those producers, their wines, boutique, artisanal, small production, are gaining traction with a lot of Chinese consumers. So that's something to watch as well.
So what you're saying is that culture of wine, which we've been waiting for about 30 years, is actually developing at the moment, possibly later than was expected.
Yeah, I think so. I think what had happened in the past with Chinese market, because a lot of producers, we hit the golden goose, right? This is the golden goose. If we do the math, that will work. And what ended up happening is the Chinese are told what to drink. And they bought so many young Bordeaux, and they drink it. It's tannic, it's stringent. They don't like it. No one wants to wake up and drink a bottle of, heavy red Bordeaux. And those wines, people will buy it for the first time, second time, but it's very hard to cultivate a real consumer base. I think it's the same case with the UK and the US, where the market was developing. People started with Blue Nun, right? And it's happening right now in China, the same rate. People started with easy drinking German Riesling, Moscato, and then they will graduate and move to some other bottles and, finer things in life.
Where does champagne fit in that?
I think it's reminding us what did happen with Japan a long time ago. And some people in the trade were saying it's never going to be a market. And when Japan started to import and to discover and to become, now it's a matured market with
it's like
people.
A third biggest market
for champagne, but China has not been starting really for champagne. But I am quite optimistic, and as you said, we always said it's not a champagne for fizz, for sparkling, but I think it is. And at some point, this market, there are a few reasons as well. The logistic, the country is huge. The logistic, the storage facilities, the extreme conditions of temperature, cold or warm. This has to become better. And there are some very nice specialists, but they need to find, as you said, their customers. There are people working on the education. There is a lot of people, and the new generation, they are willing, they are expecting, they are traveling, or they are going to travel again. Maybe they didn't travel for a few years, but they are very interested in everything new. And as European producers, we should be positive, because they are willing to come, to discover, to see what's happening. It did happen really in the luxury industry, and I think it's going to happen with the wine industry, but all the wine industry. Yes, you have the majority of the people who are probably willing to start from the entry level. You have some people who are, who have some means and who are ready to experiment some expensive wines. But sometimes, it's nice when you are rich, you have the means, and you have a good palate, and you love the expensive wines, because if you have the possibility, it's great to do. Yeah. But a lot of people as well have to enter in that sector. Yeah. And this is quite exciting. All over the world for many years, and especially the post-COVID years, when everybody was overselling. Most of the producers, but it has been moving from the on-trade to the off-trade. A lot of people have been buying online. A lot of people have been buying because of the brand, because of the name of the origin. But we are in a people business, so we need to go back to this basis, which is we have to know our salespeople, we have to know our customer, and these people are our best ambassadors. So this is what we have to invest in people, and I'm quite convinced about that. Of course, some big brands are, as you said earlier, Anne, are very strong in marketing, in advertising, but it's not all. I mean, we need to go to make masterclass, to teach, to educate, to go, a glassware, what kind of glassware. And in Japan, it's amazing. I mean, you go in places and maybe in France we still have something to do about glassware.
So you see education as a key part of the export toolbox.
Education, and we have to know the market. I mean, I think people forgot to go in the market. Yeah. They forgot to, and a lot of people are traveling, and I think to welcome these people who are avid of discovering the terroir, the origins, the regions, the way we open our doors in the wine regions and each producer, and it's not a trend. I think it's a long-term thing. People are visiting. They want to have the history. They want to have the roots. So it's important for everybody to see what they want to do tomorrow. But so many markets are discovering the wines of the world. So I think the opportunity, and we will talk about it later probably, but the new possibilities, new market today, the safety belt for all the producers is to make sure that we take care of all the markets. And maybe during the easier years, we have been a bit lazy, and we have been just counting on the 10, 15, 20 major markets. But a lot of smaller markets, they are willing to get some sourcing.
So I'm going to skip 2 questions because that's a very good point, and I'd planned actually to get onto that. So it's tempting for a company looking at export to target the biggest market, but the point you make is very valid. Sometimes there are other markets. I remember during our phone call, you were talking about opportunity in Asia. I mean, I know Portugal has a special relationship with Brazil. So can you all, in turn, let's start with you, Frederico. Tell us about how Portuguese wine look at the world and decide which, I don't want to call them secondary market because that sounds disparaging, but smaller market could be part of the export strategy of companies because they're possibly less crowded, because they're possibly more willing. I remember early on when I started selling, you tried to make an appointment in London, impossible. You try to make an appointment in Glasgow or in Manchester, people would be delighted to have someone come and see them. So is it the same thing when you talk about other countries than China and Japan?
Okay, regarding the conversation we are having, totally agree. And when it comes to Portugal, our exports have been growing a lot since we are having more tourism in Portugal. So Portugal is now quite trendy to tourism and eno-tourism. So a lot of people is traveling to Portugal, and we have seen that our exports to the countries where people are coming from, the exports of wines are growing a lot. So it means that people go to Portugal, they discover Portugal, discover the wines, discover the culture, and when they go back, they keep drinking Portuguese wines. The best, as you know. But different wines, because we have different wines. And we communicate a world of difference because of our terroirs and different grape varieties. So now our strategic plan 2030 is to invest or concentrate the investment in just 15 countries. Although and answering your question, even in these countries, we are trying to disperse. So it means when we are going to UK, you're not just going to London, we are going to Manchester, we are going to Scotland, we are going to... So the same in Brazil. Brazil is a very important market for Portuguese wines, but we are not just going to São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. So we are going to Florianópolis, Curitiba, Brasília, Belo Horizonte, São Salvador. So we are covering the whole country. So it's kind of that strategy. The same in South Korea, the same in Japan. We are not just going to the city capitals. We are trying to cover the country and grow the knowledge of Portuguese wines in these 15 countries. So.
And how did you choose these 15 countries?
Well, it's a lot of points we analyzed.
Give us your export secrets.
Okay. It was our exports to those countries. It was the growth of consumption in those countries, of general consumption of wines in those countries, the economy of those countries, the traveling to Portugal from those countries. So it's a lot of parameters we have been analyzing just to select 15.
Okay.
And I think mostly the major ones like UK, Canada, United States, Brazil, UK, Japan, South Korea, China. Although China has been dropping for everyone and even for us, we keep our presence in China, but we don't go just to Shanghai. We are going to other cities. We're going to Chengdu. We're going to Macau. We are going to Shenzhen, to a lot of cities even in China. So try to, with education, and education I think it's the key point, spread the words of our world, which is a world of difference, and to show people Portuguese wines.
Okay, we'll go back to education later. Natalie, what would you say are the hot countries to watch in Asia?
Well, definitely. I always tell people, calling back to your point about China even, just quickly going back. Because China, people think about China as this kind of monolithic country, but you have to remember China is the size of Europe. Yes. Each province, we have 30-some provinces. Each province has its own dynamic. So when you look at that, think about the China market, how to tackle it. Like you said, you're going to different markets other than Shanghai. That is really the strategy. You have to really deepen your penetration across the country. Think about each province as a different sort of kingdom on its own. And then back to Asia. And then Asia again, it's so diverse. People always talk about South Korea, Japan, of course, Singapore, Hong Kong, those mature markets. But beyond those markets, one of the most exciting markets that's been talked about and discussed very often is Thailand. Thailand last year scrapped their, import tariffs down from 54 and 60%, completely removed that. They also halved their excise tax. So Thailand being a market that's already very strong in hospitality and tourism with all the good infrastructure. You have rich tourists coming from China, Russia, Europe, US, everywhere. And then couple that with the reduction policy shift. So it has attracted a lot of attentions from the wine industry. So certainly that's one market to watch. And then, India, Vietnam, those are new markets coming up, emerging markets as well, grabbing a lot of attention. So definitely look beyond Japan, Korea, those mature markets, to look at those small satellite markets, because those markets would have immense potential. Like you said, London is so competitive. It would be the same with Japan. It's so competitive. Every importer wants to be there. But then look beyond that. Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, even. Those are markets sort of untapped. It was vast potential. If you go there, you could actually be the first one to open up the market. So that would be quite exciting.
What's your experience of that?
I think they are. For many years, we were talking about in Asia. Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong. Hong Kong has been quite affected, but these markets have been very good. For us, I would say they have been existing for quite a long time. the only one I think we need to explore more are maybe South America and Africa, because we have not been in these markets. The big development in the last few years, I would say in the last 10, 15 years, has been more on the east part of Europe, where you had so many countries who have never, I mean, they didn't have access to the wines and quality wines, and they have a culture of wine. So when you talk about Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, all the Baltics, I mean, and the Nordics, for champagne, people in the north of Europe love champagne. And in the east part of Europe, I would say the same. And Slovenia and Poland, and I mean, these markets are big markets, and they are growing. And people are, and they were used to have only a few brands, like the big one. This is why I think I'm always talking, when I am talking to smaller producers or growers, and they complain about the big boys, the big groups. I mean, the big groups.
You mean you?
No, because we are small among this world. But I always say that they should have a lot of respect for the big brands, because the big brands have been planting the flags in all these markets. And they have been the one putting means, investing. In champagne, in China, for many years, the champagne was not a source of profit for the one who have been investing. It was in the big hotels, international hotels. It was a free champagne. The cost of champagne had to be very low to attract the buyers. But the brunch or the weekend brunch for mostly international people was that was the volume of champagne sold in because it was free. It was included in the ticket for the Sunday
brunch,
or the
Sunday brunch in Hong Kong.
Bottomless brunch.
Yeah, Hong Kong is super popular. It's, but Hong Kong is a completely different market. So you have Krug for like weekend brunch, free flow.
Free? Okay, I have to go there.
But you pay. I have to know. But you pay $300 US per head.
If you have to fly to Hong Kong to get your free, it's not good, and it's not saving the planet.
So was that part of a brand building exercise, a kind of market opening exercise?
I think historically, I mean, for a brand like Paul Roger, I mean, we export, because our export is probably 90%, which is...
And how many countries?
Probably around 100. So quite a lot of markets. But for many years, we had a lot of requests. And when I was saying that at some point we have been lazy, is that we had a lot of people knocking to our door because they wanted to have access. But to start, export wine is, you need to have a know-how. I mean, and if you have a small market, it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of documents, it's a lot of... So for the smaller producers, it's not really easy. And for the larger one, you have to decide to go in the market, to enter into the market, and you have to invest, because and if you are going to do a launch in a new market, I mean, you have to travel there, you have to organize some tasting, you have to organize, and maybe the first few years sales are not going to cover, most probably are not going to cover. So. And I think the frustration today for a lot of newcomers is that they want to have everything happening like that.
Yeah. Actually.
And it's not like that. I mean, and this is why they have to follow. And I think this is why we have. In Champagne, we have a trade organization. We are trying to communicate as well all this information to the producers and the negotiants, but they have to follow what's happening, and there is a growth. So this is why we have to be positive. I mean, I am, as you know, Anne, old enough to have been going through a few cycles. I mean, up and down in the wine industry, and we are at the moment in a we say in French, dans le dur. We are in it, and
a tough cycle.
In the tough cycle. But the tough cycle, I mean, the beauty of everything happening nowadays is that the cycles are not that long. I mean, they used to be long cycles, and it was good when you were in the good one, the positive one. But look at what did happen in 2020. 2020 was the end of the world. After 6 months, everything was closed. The markets were nobody was traveling, and then we had 21, 22, 23, very good for most of the producers. Now everything is stopping, but it's not the end.
Slowing down.
No, but stopping. What I am meaning is some people as well are losing their nerves, and this is a problem. I mean, at the same time we had the rates. I mean, we have to finance. When you imagine in some industry, and especially champagne, you have to carry a few years of inventory before you can sell them. So when your financial costs are increasing because you have to carry, I mean, we purchase or we produce grapes that are going to go in wine that we are going to sell in 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And some people cannot support that anymore because we have been in some very good years with free money. I mean, we could borrow money and the cost of that money was not too much, so you could carry it. But look at what is happening in some region. I mean, talking about some Grand Cru regions, I mean, in the regions where they have the most expensive wines, the game is changing. So it's a big challenge.
There's one country, one continent I'd like to talk about briefly. It's Africa. Because I remember Nigeria being touted as the next big country for champagne. And during the video, the Vinexposium Awards, one of the nominees in the new product category was Lolly Wines, which is exactly what you're describing, a sort of entry-level sweet wine for the Kenyan and other African markets, devised by a woman. Very sensible people, women. And I thought that was really interesting because it looks like a culture of wine is developing anew in Africa. For the two of you who are involved in directly exporting, what's your view of Africa as a potential?
We are not investing in Africa right now, so we have a strong connection with Angola, because Angola used to be Portuguese, so we have a strong connection with Angola and Mozambique, both of them. But what we have seen in the last years in these two markets, I mean these two particular markets, it's that consumption is dropping, and especially average price is dropping a lot. So they're buying very inexpensive wines. So these are turning into two countries that are not very interesting for us because the price of the wines they want to buy, it's too low. So we're trying not to invest in Africa. Yes, it's true that Nigeria has been pointed out for many years now as the next big thing or next big market, especially in Africa. But what we have seen in Nigeria, it's the sales or the imports are quite stable or increasing very slowly. So we are now not focusing on Africa, we are trying to reach some other latitudes because we don't see an increase in the market of African market.
What about you, Laurent? For champagne and for French wine generally?
No, I mean for French wine, as you know, some French negotiants are strong in Africa because they have been historically strong there, and they know the markets, and they know the right people, and they know the right Lebanese people, and they know the right. There is a tradition. For us, for Paul Roger, I mean, basically, we are not really there beside South Africa. South Africa is already quite matured market. And the north of Morocco. Morocco is pretty good because they have tourism. Nigeria has been buoyant with champagne, and it's a market where the big or the leader, the big brands, have been investing a lot because you had a lot of money, a lot of business, and you have a lot of influencers, and you have a lot of followers. And once the big and important person in business or in because I mean in business it has been some very big new company. When this owner of companies are having a wedding, having a party, it's a lot of bottles of champagne, and the brand of the champagne is very important. But in fact, we can. It's a little bit what's happening in the Caribbean, in Martinique and in Guadeloupe, and in where you can see that the celebration, the wedding, the party is something important.
Luxury.
And they do it big. And when they have celebration, it's not one couple of hours, it's a few days. So this is very important, and I think it's a continent in Africa where people like to celebrate. When you see the age of the population, I mean, it is a market for tomorrow, I am convinced, because there are going to be new industry, new development, I mean, there are a lot of young people, and all these young people are going to. It's a market where we are not. I mean, you have a little bit of sales in Ivory Coast or in Senegal or for some historical reasons, but it's limited to some people. Like China, I think the storage capacity, the market is historically spirit and beer. I mean, more. Because you have not this problem of storage, and you have not this problem of Nigeria. I mean, we do work in Nigeria, not a lot, but or maybe not as much as what was requested at some point. But maybe we have not been willing to go too quickly there because we like to know what's happening, and sometimes you do not understand everything. And at some point, when we are putting our wines in a container, we like to. It's a signature, so we want to be sure to see what's happening and who is consuming it and what is the reason.
And how the wine is kept, and to make sure it gets to the consumer in the best possible state.
And there are other development, big change at the moment. It's the airline business, which is big for some wines and some and champagne.
Normally the price is,
yes, depending, because I mean you have as well, and you know the difference between a price in at the back of the plane or in business class or in first class, and for some good wines. At the front of the plane, it's not the same volume, but usually the price is not as discounted. But at the moment, because some big brands are as well have been producing a lot of wine, the buyers are going back to the big brands because the customer recognize as well the big brands. And if the big brands are at a lower price, the challengers have juste leurs larmes pour pleurer. At some point, it's a
difficult situation.
But we are seeing this even in Portugal. So because when there's a drop in the markets, consumers go to big brands because they trust them, they know them. So No.
Well, it's also the importance of brand building, which we were talking about earlier. You invest a lot at the beginning, you build your brand, but then people get back to you in tough times.
If you have not been too arrogant.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That is true as well.
Also.
But there is, I mean, we've all done the test. You have a tasting of champagne and, you know, people blind, and people will choose one as their favorite, and then you take the top off and they go back to the brands they know, and you go, no, that doesn't work. Anyway, Frederico, could you tell us, so we've talked about brands, we've talked about countries of origin. How can an interprofession, a generic organization, best help their producers to conquer new markets?
Yeah. So the thing is, Portugal, although Portugal is the 9th biggest exporter in the world, and we are a small country. We are a very small country, although in wine we become a bit bigger. But most people, I would say 10 years ago, most people didn't know much about Portuguese wine. It was all about ports, and that's it.
Yeah.
So people didn't know the Portuguese wine. So the big advantage, or the big thing was having an interprofessional with these brands, Wines of Portugal, a common brand for everyone, and bringing the producers all together. It's easier to make the brand Portugal and to be recognized by the consumers, by the importers, and so on. And also, because we take care of everything when we go together, we take care of all the logistics, and we get funded for that. So it will make it cheaper for the wine producers to come with us. So coming with us, it's less expensive for them. Mm-hmm. It's a guarantee that the brands go through the consumers and the importers. And we also help them attracting the buyers. Mm-hmm. So it's an easier way to...
How do you do that?
Oh, we do a lot of contacts, because whenever we come to wine fairs like this, we invite a lot of people to come and visit the Portuguese stands. So it's kind of a guarantee for the consumers, for the producers, that they will make some contacts, and that the brand Portugal will help them to sell wines.
Yeah.
Okay. So
with some pastéis de Natal, de Belém.
With some pastéis de Belém, if we could. Yes, it goes great with sweet wines. Not just port, but Madeira wines and Muscat wines. Yes, of course.
So we've talked about the role of generic, we've talked about the role of brand. Do you have any specific recommendation for premium producers? Because I think that's a very specific niche in the wine and spirits market. So, Nathalie, do you have any recommendation for premium producers? And Laurent, I want to know about allocations and how you manage that, because that must be quite a tricky situation to find yourself in.
But premium producers in terms of like reaching to consumers, or how to conquer a new market?
How to conquer a new market and how to manage these markets, because obviously as a premium producer, you cannot discount your brand too much, you have limited volumes. So how do you see that working when you arrive on a new market?
I think with the new market, especially for prestigious brands, that you have to be conscious with where do you want your wines to be presented. Because with prestigious wines, a lot of the consumers look at it as aspirational. So how do people access your wines? That could be a key point. I think a lot of the prestigious brands, even wineries, they go to a new market and they say, I want my wine to be listed in 3 Michelin-star restaurants. Certainly that's a way to do it.
Whatever the cost.
Yeah, exactly. What are the costs? So nowadays, especially with the restaurant business not doing so great and consumption going down, you have to be creative in your ways of reaching end consumers and conquering the new market. How are you working with your importers as well? How are you looking at the distribution? Do you want to, give exclusive distribution to one brand, or a lot of the prestigious brands nowadays, especially coming from New World, they're just going to La Place. See, that's another way, there's,
But the Laplace is going to have more non-border wines in their list, so it's going to be.
That's another
problem.
podcast episode.
I think I was about to say, we need to talk about Laplace another time because that is a very, very specific topic.
Yeah, but then again, I think that's a new trend for a lot of prestigious new world brands, just, doing that route. But then again, going back to your point, it's really looking at the people, creating experiences for the consumers, especially a new market. People, you have to ensure a storage condition, education, how are we reaching that? And again, understanding your importers, the new market, what consumers want, and creating that kind of experience, and then create that kind of stickiness with consumers. Because you don't want them to go to your wine dinner, okay, I buy a case and that's it. But, I never come back to buy that. What are the experience? What's keeping them to go back to a brand, to build that loyalty is something that's going to be very important for those big brands to answer.
So, Laurent, what do you think about that?
I think you were talking about allocation, and in fact, the allocation system, and we have been, we have been putting in place allocation for our brand 15, 16 years ago. And the reason why was to make sure that all our markets were going to have access to all our champagne and our vintages and new release every year, because you cannot say it's open bar and if people have more money and are quicker, they are going to take all the new release and the new. So it has been a very good tool for us. You just have to be careful not to do it, as I said before, with arrogance. It's just a safety belt for our partners. And you can. We have been trying to work on the average of the previous 3 years, and the idea was to protect the smaller markets because the one with shipping 1 pallet or 2 pallets a year is not going to have access to what he wants if he's waiting too long. But if he's giving a commitment and saying, if you protect me, I can tell you that we will take it. I mean, it's easier for us to keep it. And it's easier for us as well to organize the production because we can get orders in advance. And nowadays, especially we have a lot of meetings during Wine Paris, and we are meeting most of our importers. We are talking, we have been presenting allocation for this year. Some big markets are having some
issues?
No issues. They have too much, and we don't want to force them to take everything we propose just to make sure that they will continue to get their allocation. But we try to discuss with them, and we say, please tell us how you feel, and if you don't need everything, it doesn't mean that you will not get your allocation next year. You will get, maybe it will be a little reduced, but I prefer that you tell me what you feel you can do this year. And then we have some other markets, they are asking for more. And I was talking about this smaller market we have not been taking care of. And for them, it's an opportunity to get more. And they will not get what we give them today. Next year, they will get a little more than what we gave last year. But it's a good way of edging our distribution. And I can tell you it's already the case, and probably it's one of the reasons we have been suffering like everybody last year, and I think it's more a matter of mix. It's the most expensive wines are quite more difficult to deplete. But we have been releasing some historical disgorgement under the name Vinotech, and it's quite limited stock, and it's pretty expensive, and this has been sold extremely well. This year we continue with that, so maybe it's not a matter of price, it's more a matter of meeting our customers, and maybe if we have some problem in some market because it's too much wine in one market, maybe it's good to give more or to give. We do not give it, but
No, I think we've got that.
to propose. To propose to other market to get what they and there is a demand, and this is the reason why. And it's true that the brand building is important. I mean, when we talk about some wineries who have been in the market for a long time, I mean, it's not just in a few years that you can do that. Establish this relationship, establish this demand, establish. Yes, we have an historical, for our champagne, we have an historical relationship with the UK, and the UK is still our first market, export market. But we never wanted that the UK represents too much compared to our production. So, I mean, it has never been more than 22% of our total production, and it means that we are not in danger if
You're not too exposed.
we try not. Although our team in the UK is trying to get more because they know they can sell more, but we don't want all our eggs in the same basket.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've got a final question about this magical toolkit for export. One of the reasons for the success of Australian wines in the UK is that, contrary to what the French were doing at the times, they did listen to what the trade and the consumers wanted. They were prepared to change the nature of their wine, their organoleptic profile, their packaging. They were very much led by the needs and the wants of the consumer, which at the time was pretty revolutionary. So would you say that in order to crack export market, I know what you're going to say, Laurent, in order to crack export market, do you have to adapt and adjust your product? And how much should you be able or prepared to go? Come on, Frederico. What concessions?
So concerning the last, just words in the last question, because what I've seen in Portugal is the well-known brands and expensive brands. They are the most expensive ones. They are selling quite easy. They are easy to sell. And they have a problem with too much demand for the quantity.
Yeah.
When it comes to smaller producers, they're not so much known, and they want to position in super premium. I mean, very expensive wines. It's all about education. It's all about connecting with the consumers and having a nice story and a nice wine, of course. But they are growing step by step because they don't have enough money to make a lot of promotion, a lot of advertising. Yeah. So it's much about communication, and they are getting quite successful. So it's easier for them, for the high-end wines, very expensive wines, it's easier to sell than the entry level.
That famous story behind the wine.
Yeah, famous story is very important, you know.
Completely
Concerning your question, yes, Australia was the first one to see that, and they made a great job, especially in the UK. Australia is now not in a good shape when it comes to the wine business. They're not doing that well, but the producers, they must adapt to the market. So that was a problem with the Portuguese wines. We were just focusing inside. Yeah. And I mean inside Portugal.
Inwards.
And inwards, in Portugal and in Angola and Mozambique. So it's a lot of wine going to Angola, to Mozambique, some to Brazil and to Portugal. So we were not going with the international style of wines. So it was more difficult to sell. When people started to go abroad, to travel, to go to the markets, to understand what the consumer wanted, we changed the profile of the wines. So the wines, they changed, they adapt to the markets. Although using our own varieties, because we have a huge diversity when it comes to varieties, style of the wines, they were being adapted to the international style. And then it depends on the country. And I've seen that many producers, they go to China and they adapt the labels even. Yeah. So they make new labels for the market, more that could be more attractive to the Chinese consumers. The same with Brazil, the same with UK, the same with US. Not just the style of the wine. Sometimes they make it more sweet or more dry or whatever. They have to adapt to that market, and also with labeling. So that's the only way to survive. It's to adapt to the markets and to the demand of the consumers.
That's very interesting. Because
Natalie, go on.
Because when you're talking about Australian wine, one interesting thing popped into my mind is how, of course, I mean, outside of the UK, the biggest success story for Australian wine is China market.
Yes.
And largely thanks to one brand, Penfolds.
Yes.
It was massive in China. It was the best known imported wine brand. Before you have DBR Lafite, Legend, Saga was selling one. Now it's all about Penfolds.
Yeah.
And it's again the story about one brand actually lifting the whole category of Australian wine. But I remember a lot of times when talking to importers, one question they always ask Australian wine producers going to a stand, they'll say, does it come with the corkscrew? So Australian wines, of course. Oh no, cork.
Yeah.
So
because
there were a lot of screw cap. So one of the things that some of the small medium producers they have to do immediately with Chinese market is really they change from screw cap to corks to cater to the market. So it was one obvious thing they had to sort of adapt.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I think packaging, you need to match the needs of the consumer and what they expect of your product, because it's not necessary product. What did you have to say on the subject, Laurent?
No, we will not go to screw cap.
You heard it here first. Paul Roger is not going to be sold under screw cap.
And we will not, I think, some may have to adjust, to adapt their product to the markets. I think the magic of champagne is as well as the magic of the blending and the consistency of a style. And if you want to meet your customers who are traveling, who are going from one market, one country to the other, who are visiting Wine Paris and going to a restaurant, we are not going to have a Brut non-vintage, which is going to have a different style in a different market. I think it has been the case probably a long time ago, and in the history of Paul Roger was producing more vintage at the beginning of the 20th century. And then has been one of the first one to do a goût anglais, so a brut champagne with less dosage and maybe more maturity. That was a choice. And in the old, if you look at some old price list from 100 years ago, you had a goût américain, a goût français, a goût anglais.
Even champagne.
No, even champagne was at the time, but I think nowadays, I mean, you have a trend. You have some people who are looking for some champagne with no dosage or less dosage. I think most of the champagne producers have been lowering their dosage level, although each producer is deciding to go until a certain point. We prefer to stay at a level, even if some people say, oh, it's still too much dosage. I think we have customers, we are aging our champagne after the release, and they need to have this minimum of dosage to make sure that the wines are going to survive for 5, 10, 15 years in the cellars. But to adjust to the market is something we don't want. I think it's a choice for a company. It's a choice for a brand, but it's a short-term view. If you want to be there for the next
century,
I'm not talking about me, but I'm talking about a brand. You should not make too much compromise. And this is why we have to make a difference between market trends, because you have the market trends and short-term one, and you have the long-term trends. And the long-term trends are very important. Are we going to I mean,
So you're not going into a can yet?
No, and we are not going, and you know, one of my other responsibilities is to co-chair the committee in charge of the protection of the appellation in Champagne, and we have to make sure that we do not compromise. I mean, when some people say, are you going to do champagne with no alcohol? No, champagne is not something with no alcohol. Are you going to make champagne with no bubbles? No, champagne is not. I mean, yes. There are a lot of things, and with the packaging, I totally agree. I mean, some people have been trying, but if champagne is becoming something which is just a commodity, and we have some fancy and funny labels and funny names, we will make sure at the Comité Champagne and this is co-managed by the grower and the negotiant and the maison, we will make sure that this is not happening. I mean, we have to protect our appellation. We have to protect the respectability of the brand Champagne, and we have to make sure that Champagne is just and I mean, China is a country which is respecting the name Champagne, and it's each time we sign agreements with countries and with other regions, it's a victory for the name Champagne, yes. And it is a safety belt for the future of the champagne producers.
I think that's a beautiful compliment you've just paid to Champagne. So I think it's going to be time to wrap up very soon. I've made a few notes about everything you've been saying. So if we were to give a potted guide to exports to our listeners, they need a good generic organization. Mm-hmm. They need to be very selective about the markets they approach.
Yep.
Tick.
Yep.
Not neglecting emerging market. Once they've chosen their market, do not just visit the capital, but go into the provinces. Be prepared to adapt your product, but not too much, and without too many compromises. Look up to Champagne, and do not make the mistakes that some countries of origins have made. Try to be multi-channel, including brand building and premium channels. Choose your distribution carefully. Build loyalty, which is part of brand building. Education. I like edutainment. I still cannot say it properly. But the idea of but that's for another podcast. And also, and I like very much what you said, be flexible, be patient, do not lose your nerves, and do not be arrogant. And I think that's a very fitting conclusion for a talk on export markets. Anything else to add?
I think we have to check maybe the quality of champagne.
Are you buying us a glass of champagne? That's a wonderful conclusion. On behalf of Vinexposium, I would like to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to me. I hope you had a good time. And let's raise our glass to a very successful Wine Paris. It's just water now, but champagne later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.